Well, it looks like Yoshi saw my video doing really well and he decided, hey, why not just change the rules of being able to deny yourself? And, you know, the thumbnail is a little bit clickbait. You can still deny yourself, but the rules have changed. Let's break down everything that there has been in the latest Deadlock patch, which actually has quite a bit of changes that may change things in the meta or hero levels as well. As always, I'll update the spreadsheet. Spreadsheet will be in the description for any builds or hero tiers that may change with this update. Before we dive deeper into the patch notes, this is a very, very quick sponsored segment for myself because sponsors don't want to sponsor me. If you want to sponsor me, please reach out. But anyway, I've just introduced a new membership tier called the Student Tier. It's $14.99 Canadian dollars a month, and what it'll give you access to is full coaching VODs that I'll post. I aim to post at least 3 to 4 full coaching VODs that are not available anywhere else, not available on my Twitch, not available on my live streams, and I will post them on this YouTube channel, but only for members of the Student Tier or above. So there's going to be definitely, you know, dozens of videos per month for sure. So make sure to join that if you want to get access to coaching. So check it out, and it supports me. I get 70% of the revenue. So thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Let's get into the patch notes. Okay, so starting with the initial changes, Rejuve only heals the person hitting the crystal. So before it healed actually everybody, it was kind of, you know, it seemed unintended. I'm actually surprised it took them this long to fix it. So great change. And now we've got the change that we talked about. Dying to a non-player when there is no bounty / assists now increases the respawn time for that death by 10 seconds. Now, this doesn't mean that denying yourself is completely dead, because assists in the early game are about 200 souls, right? So it's still worth it in specific situations, but the 10-second death timer, you know, that really like changes a lot. So you really have to make sure that you're in the assist range, essentially, right? What that changes is that if there's no assist, it's not worth it. So you actually need to, you know, deny yourself faster than you used to before. So right after you get a kill, you deny yourself to the tower right away. Then it's probably okay, because yeah, you're giving them a little bit of souls, but at least your death is not longer. So you really can't afford for your death to be longer by 10 seconds early game most times. Patron first death time is now a constant 12 seconds. So this is great because before there was basically the instant drop that would happen where sometimes you would down the patron, you would shoot the patron, it would down and it would be like right above the pit, and then it would go down instantly. Not instantly, but like much faster, and that was kind of a problem. So it being a constant is a great in my book. We've got probably the most funny thing, which is Abrams' Infernal Resilience always getting changed by 1%. This is classic Yoshi balancing, but anyway, now it goes from 12 to 13. I mean, I guess slight buff for Abrams. I don't really think he needed it, but we've got some Bebop changes. So unfortunately for me, the Bebop is getting buffed. Now, he was pretty weak, so I'll accept some buffs, but you know, we all hate Bebop here, but we'll accept them for now. We'll accept them. Billy getting his base health increased by 10. So that's pretty great for Billy. I don't think he really needed the buff. I think he was actually one of the stronger new heroes in my opinion, but you know, it's very slight buff. So 10 HP base health as well as 3 seconds off his rising ramp. This basically will help his laning stage as well as his scaling off of tanky items a little bit, and I think will help, you know, push him as one of the better heroes, but we'll see. Calico getting some love. So for a long time, Calico has been kind of underwhelming, and so they've upped her bombs tier 3, which was not really that good of an AP, to +3 bombs instead of +2, which is a 50% buff essentially. That's very, very significant. So I'm excited to test out the new kind of Gloom Bombs build and see if it's any better. Leaping slash scaling on the healing as well as the damage has been increased. The tier 3 on Ava has been increased as well. So it may actually be viable to not go Fortitude and instead just max Ava. That could be something interesting, although I'm not really convinced. And her ultimate has once again been buffed, so 10 seconds less on the ultimate. It got nerfed many times before, so now it's back to where it was previously. Doorman is getting a buff and some nerfs. His nerf is to his early game. Call Bell is getting reduced damage by 10 here, but the spirit scaling is getting increased by 0.1. So what this means is that you'll actually, I believe you'll need a total of a 100 spirit to get back to where you were with Call Bell before, if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I am. So overall, it's definitely a nerf, but the buff is here. Hotel guest now teleports the target back to the beginning of the hotel if they fall into the void. So previously, you could counterspell the hotel, and now if you basically, you can't counterspell. Previously, you could just drop down into the pit, counterspell. Now you can't do that anymore. Drifter health gain per boon reduced from 41 to 39. His weapon fall off has also been reduced a little bit. So these are both nerfs, to be clear. The weapon damage gain per boon is also a nerf. For those that don't understand, this essentially means his weapon scaling is worse. His damage amp on his tier 3 is also been reduced. And Rend now causes you to briefly float in the air during the cast time. This is not really a nerf or a buff. This actually, I guess you could say it's perhaps a buff. We'll see. I'm not really sure, but basically when you cast it, you're going to kind of like stick in the air a little bit. Great Talon, bullet damage growth based on spirit increased by 0.07 to 0.08. Spirit snare curse duration increased from 2 seconds to 2.25 seconds. The spirit snare tier 2 was changed from curse duration to minus bullet resistance, which is kind of interesting. And then on top of that, he now deals, his thing got moved to the tier 3 upgrade, which is now plus 1 second curse duration and plus 1.5 meter radius, which makes this curse, you know, that's gonna be pretty long. And there might be some funny builds where you just go like reach and like echo shard and you just lay down a bunch of traps. But that could be funny. Thank you, Yoshi, for nerfing Holliday. Her bullet damage has been reduced by 4 base bullet damage. That's a very significant nerf. That's almost, you know, that's like 17%, I think, nerf. That's going to be a massive nerf to her overall DPS. But her bullet growth has been increased in order to compensate. So this is mostly going to be a nerf to her laning stage, but it's still going to take her a lot of boons to kind of get back to the previous level that she was at. So overall, a nerf to her DPS for sure. Powder keg displacement duration has been reduced significantly. The base damage has been reduced a little bit. The tier 2 has been reduced. The spirit scaling has been increased, but not anywhere enough to make up. You're still going to need 50 spirit to get back to what you were you're going to need 100 spirit to get back to the previous damage you had, right? So that's a lot of spirit. The charges have been reduced, and now the tier 3 has been buffed a little bit to increase the displacement duration, but it's still going to be worse than before. So very well deserved nerfed in my opinion. You know, we'll see in game, but I think Holliday should be in a much better spot now. Infernus getting some slight nerfs, probably deserved to an extent, but not, you know, it's nothing crazy. I mean, it's just 3 DPS loss on the Flame Dash and 2 DPS loss on the tier 2. I think Infernus is like mostly balanced, so just a slight little nerf to make him feel slightly more manageable with his Flame Dash build, which I think was particularly doing really well in the lower ranks, so I think it's totally fine. Kelvin essentially getting not much of a change, 2 seconds on his Frost Grenade. Sure, Mina getting Rake Heal Spirit scaling increase from 1 to 1.5. That's pretty significant for her sustain in the laning stage and in other parts of the game. Love Bites buildup now takes 1 less shot, which is quite significant. Love Bites on proc damage increased by 10, which is also very significant. The spirit scaling was also increased, and her ultimate cooldown was decreased. So this should help make the hero feel like it does more damage. Now, they're not buffing her tankiness and her survivability, which I love. They're staying with the identity of Mina, and I think it's great. Mirage got tier 3 scarabs buffed by 10. Honestly, I'm not really against that, despite being kind of a Mirage hater. I think that his tier 3 scarabs were a little bit underwhelming, and so buffing it by 10 is fine by me. You know, nobody was really maxing them anyway, and it wasn't really what made Mirage cancer. I think it's one of the more interesting parts of Mirage's kit. Bone Krill getting a very small cast range change on his combo. Sure, I mean, you know, it feels bad to get kidnapped from a distance by Mo, so why not? Paige got her buff to her barrier spirit power scaling, which is, I guess, kind of nice. She's decent, but she doesn't feel like overwhelmingly strong. And Paradox got a very, very, very slight nerf to bullet damage growth, which won't impact her DPS much, but I think she was slightly too strong. I mean, I did put her in S tier, so I think it's somewhat deserved. 7 here got his move speed reduced. He got his crit resistance reduced significantly from 35 to 25%. For those that didn't know, 7's helmet essentially gave him crit resistance. It still does, but just minus 25 instead of 35. His tier 3 spirit power scaling has been reduced. The spirit scaling on Stormcloud DPS has been reduced as well, and the initial radius from 12 to 10 meters. So overall 7 nerfs. I do think he was one of the stronger carries in the game, if not the strongest. So the nerfs probably will bring him a little bit more in line with others like Infernus and Wraith. So Shiv, the infamous Shiv. I mean, you know, we all hate and love Shiv at the same time. And we got some changes to him. So we got the Serrated Knives tier 3, went from 37 damage to 40 damage and plus 7 instead of plus 6.5. That is pretty significant. His knives already do a lot of damage, so you could see more Knife Shiv. And then Slice and Dice, tier 3 max CD reduction, got another 2 seconds, which is also quite significant. So Spirit Shiv is getting a lot of buffs here. And Bloodletting cooldown has been reduced by another 5 seconds, which incentivizes you to build cooldown, right? So another buff to Spirit Shiv. Bloodletting incoming damage deferred increased by 5%, which, I mean, all Shivs can benefit from, but I do think that we're going to see a resurgence of a lot of Spirit Shiv with these changes, and I think that these changes, even though they might not seem super significant, might be enough to bring Shiv back into the fray from when I had him in C tier to B or even A tier, but we'll see. Now, Sinclair getting some changes. It looks like his base damage on Spectral Assistant getting nerfed once again, but the Spirit Scaling getting buffed in order to try to compensate. You know, it's still going to take you a little bit of Spirit, but it will get stronger because the nerf is not so significant. So when you have a bunch of Spirit, it'll do more damage than it did before. And the Tier 3 got a significant buff to plus 60%. Instead of 45% fire rate, which is very, very, very significant. The Tier 3 Bunny Hex went from plus 5 to plus 7% damage amp, which is a small buff. Won't change too much, but it's a little buff. And his cooldown, his old cooldown, which was already, I mean, quite short, as well as the duration, both got buffs. Sinclair, I don't think was particularly weak. I think he was perhaps a little bit underperforming, but in the hands of a good player was definitely good. But these changes are interesting. I'm curious if we'll see more Sinclairs build around the assistant and just build basically a lot of Spirit with that fire rate. I mean, 60% fire rate is no joke, and perhaps you can introduce some gun items in there and get creative with items like long range or other things that might benefit a lot from the fire rate, because getting 60% fire rate on an ability is kind of unheard of. I don't think there's any other hero other than like Ivy with like a million Spirit on her tether that gives you that much fire rate. Victor got a small health nerf, and he got the jumpstart recharge timer from 3 seconds to 8 seconds, which is very significant and will make rapid recharge much more mandatory on the hero. And he got a 1 meter nerf to his aura, which is definitely significant. And his cooldown is now from 1 second to 2.5. So if you toggle it off, you know, you don't have it for a little bit, which is significant. This might be enough to bring him in line, but we'll see. Vindicta. We've all had experiences getting stake and crowed, and you know, it's just not that fun. And so stake got some changes. First of all, it no longer pulls you if you were outside the tether range. So before, the capture range was bigger than the tether range, and so essentially if you got captured, it would pull you inwards towards the tether range itself, right? Now it no longer pulls you, so they just made it so the tether range and the capture range are the same, so it won't feel like you just get like pulled into something when you felt like you were outside of an ability, for example. The stake duration was nerfed by 0.25 seconds. The stake slow was increased from 30% to 40%, so that's a buff, but the other changes are significant nerfs, but I'm guessing the stake slow is to compensate a little bit. Her flight was buffed, the spirit damage, as well as the duration, as well as her tier 2 and tier 3 upgrade quite significantly. So flight build might be a way to go potentially if you want to go more carry Vindicta. And her crow was kind of reworked a little bit. The debuff is shorter now, and the spirit scaling got nerfed, but the bleed per second is increased, which means it'll do more damage in kind of like a smaller window, but it won't last as long, so it won't be as good as at applying every debuff. And the cooldown also essentially got nerfed, going from -16 to -12 on the tier 2. Viscous's alt-fire got the Yamato treatment of being brought down from 63 to 48, bringing him in line with Yamato, and you know, Viscous should be a lot less annoying to fight in lane because of this. I think it's a great change. The alt-fire damage growth did get buffed, but it will take some time for him to even get back to baseline, even with the buff. So overall, a Viscous nerf, especially a nerf to the, you know, express shot build. So this is good. The character was quite oppressive with that build specifically, and it felt a bit cheesy, so I'm fine with this. And we got some Vyper changes, some Screwjab Dagger buffs, cooldown decrease, more spirit scaling. Her minimum range for the fall off increased by 2 meters, which is significant for sure. Will make her feel like she does a little bit more damage when people aren't right in her face. And pretty much all of her stuff got buffed slightly, right? Especially the Petrifying Bola cooldown reduced by 20 seconds. This could make a more Spirit Vyper viable again, potentially, where you go Shadow Wave, you roam around, but we will see. Warden base sprint speed reduced by 0.5, his Alchemical Flask tier 2 got nerfed, and his Last Stand spirit scaling got reduced a little bit. This should help him feel a little bit more in line with the other heroes. I don't think he needed massive nerfs. He was definitely strong, but like I said, the difference between S tier and A tier heroes wasn't like huge. To finish it off, we've got a bunch of item changes. A lot of these are small, so I'll kind of try to be fast so you guys can get to the, you know, real important ones. Weakening Headshot is kind of whatever, you know, -12 to -13. That's great. The debuff duration was increased. That's also great. Backstabber's cooldown got increased and the damage got reduced, which also a good change. Long range now gives fall off range. Now this is actually quite significant because fall off range works with things that apply on your weapon. For example, siphon bullets, toxic bullets, things like that. On hit effects in general, things that have fall off benefit from you getting increased fall-off range. So I do think that we'll see a little bit more long range. Now, it's already quite strong in my opinion. I don't really think it needed this, but it does make sense because it builds into Sharpshooter, and Sharpshooter also gives you fall-off range. Sharpshooter also got a slight buff. Blood Tribute also got a slight buff. I mean, to be honest, Blood Tribute is just like unbelievable at this point. 10% spirit resistance. The active move speed is 2.25. This item is so statted, it's kind of crazy. Headhunter bonus damage boon scaling increased slightly. The item was a little bit underwhelming. Shadow Weave's movement speed, sprint speed increased significantly, so you'll feel a lot faster using Shadow Weave, which I think is a great change. Capacitor now grants you 8% fire rate, and the projectile speed got increased. I think it did need some buffs, so I'm happy with these. It should make the item feel quite powerful and see a little bit more play. Crippling Headshot got a slight buff. Ricochet got a nerf where it doesn't target the zipline targets, so you don't randomly like down people from the zipline. And Spellslinger got a slight buff as well on duration. Rebuttal got kind of a crazy buff where now instead of giving you 50% melee damage on successful parry, it gives you 30% bonus damage. Now, early game, this is not really that much of a buff, right? Because early game, you could just like two-shot people with melee after you parried them. So I would say early game, it doesn't really matter. But later on in the game, when you rebuttal someone, if you're a hero like Wraith, for example, that just does a lot of damage, but not that much melee damage, you're going to be able to just melt the person that you just rebuttaled. So kind of a crazy buff. The item is actually really strong already, so maybe we'll see a little bit more of it. Weapon shielding just got easier to proc, essentially. You just need to take a little bit less damage. Return Fire got a slight buff. It fell out of favor quite considerably. It's a very hard item to balance, so now it just gives you a little bit more innate bullet resistance. Restorative Locket is now moving forward to the boon scaling. So before, a lot of items scaled with spirit. Now a lot of items scale with boons. And I think that we'll see this with a lot of other items. That, you know, I expect that eventually we'll see Reactive Barrier move away from the spirit scaling into the boon scaling. This just kind of favors build diversity and doesn't necessarily incentivize you to build spirit specifically to benefit from these items. Especially Restorative Locket, who's not an item that necessarily benefits spirit users, should be, in my opinion, just scaling with boons in general. So I think it's a great change. Guardian Ward and Divine Barrier got a slight cast range buff. Sure, we'll take it. Veilwalker heal per boon increased and duration increased. I think Veilwalker is gonna, you know, is at the point where it's pretty good still. It feels a little awkward to use sometimes, but the stats it gives are really good. And now the duration is quite important for ganks, right? Especially if you get duration extender, giving it by 1 second and then being multiplied by that duration extender is really, really nice for sure. Healing Nova getting a slight buff. I mean, the item is probably one of the most underbought items in the game, so I totally see it. Metal Skin from 4 to 5 seconds. Now, this item will be an incredibly powerful answer to gun characters, especially if you have Duration Extender, which will give you like another 30% on top of that. Now, you know, I'm not very good at math, but 30% of 5 seconds seems kind of crazy. I mean, I think you'll get your Metal Skin to last about maybe 6.3, 6.4 seconds. That's 6.4 seconds where the Wraith like literally cannot do any damage. Well, I mean, she can do some damage, but for example, Haze will not be able to do any damage to you. So this change might actually kill Haze. We'll see, but that's like a very, very significant change for sure. Counterspell, very slight nerf. I mean, it lasted so long. 1 second was kind of crazy. 0.9 seconds seems a lot more in line. Trophy Collector got another buff. I mean, Yoshi, please stop buffing Trophy Collector. It's going to get to the point where I'll have to stop hating on the item because it'll actually start to be good. So maybe this item, maybe this buff brings it online, but it still suffers from the same issue of being an item that needs you to get stack, but doesn't actually give you any stats when you buy it. So you're throwing 2,400 and you're kind of gambling those souls. And if you get a bunch of kills quickly, the item becomes insane. If you don't get kills and the game's not going your way, the item is essentially trash and worthless. Cheat Death got a very small cooldown reduction, but if you have Transcendent cooldown now, the fact that it's a 90-second cooldown with Transcendent cooldown will bring it down to like a 65-second cooldown. That means that you have Cheat Death basically every single fight, especially in the late game. This item could start to be pretty good. Witchmail got a very slight spirit power bonus increase from 10 to 14. Just a slight little buff. I mean, like I said in the past, Witchmail is a good item, but it was so situational. It felt kind of awkward to buy. So giving it a little bit more stats, I think, will help it make it feel more impactful. Siphon Bullets got also the boon treatment. Thank God. Thank God for Siphon Bullets. It went from 55 to 35. Max HP steal now scales per boon. So basically, if you buy Siphon Bullets as like your first item, or if you rush it like at 8 minutes like some people were doing, it's not really going to do that much. But later on in the game, it's going to do decent. But, you know, essentially it's going to take you about 20 to 25 boons to get back to where it was before. Now, for 20 to 25 boons, that's pretty significant. I think there's something like 40 boons total, so you need to be like probably around 20k souls or something for it to get back to its former glory. I'm not exactly sure on the math, and I don't have time to do it for this video, but that's very, very significant. The duration was also nerfed by 3 seconds, so another nerf to Siphon. Inhibitor got a slight buff, duration increased, and healing reduction increased. This should help also deal with heroes such as Victor. Rusted Barrel, another very slight buff. I mean, it's really not that far from being a good item, but maybe it needs a little bit more. -6 might be a little low. Perhaps it should be -7, but that's a good direction. Bullet Resist Shredder now no longer gives you melee resistance. Instead, gives you bullet resistance, which is interesting. So that's a less source of melee resistance. I don't think they gave it to any other item either. So this is overall a buff to melee damage, I would say, because bullet resistance is worse than melee resistance against melee damage, of course. Bit of an interesting change. Cold Front got a damage reduction by 25. It was a very, very powerful flat damage item. I would have liked to see perhaps a buff to the scaling, you know, to offset this, because this feels like the damage is a little bit low. But at the same time, this will give you more incentive to upgrade to Arctic Blast, because Arctic Blast, I don't think got a nerf. I mean, we don't see any nerfs here. So, you know, it'll give you a little bit more incentive. Quicksilver Reload also got a very slight damage nerf. It looks like these flat damage items are getting nerfed in the early game. Spirit Sap got another buff. Now, Spirit Power reduction from 18 to -24. So you just steal -24 Spirit, which is kind of crazy. And then Silence Wave got reduced on duration, but the width got increased, and it also gets the Spirit Power reduction buff. So this is a bit interesting. It'll make it feel more like a, you know, anti-spellcaster item. Like stealing 24 Spirit from the enemy is quite significant for sure. Torment Pulse got a slight buff in cooldown. I mean, this is like probably like a 5% DPS increase, which is not bad. Decay, slight buff as well. Spirit Scaling, very significant buff. I mean, you know, it might not seem like much, but going from 0.38 to 0.55 is about, you know, that's like a 40% buff to the Spirit Scaling, I think, just off the top of my head. Magic Carpet, the buff, this is what we all needed. Focus Lens now deal damage whenever the buff is removed rather than only on expire. Okay, that's actually a great solution to the problem of Focus Lens, which is the problem that it just got debuff removed and it did nothing. This actually makes Focus Lens a real item. I actually didn't even think of this solution. Before I was just like, just make Focus Lens at 3200, but this is a really good way to solve the problem, because now if they don't debuff remove it, it's insane value. So this item is probably way more real than it was before. Escalating Exposure actually got a nerf, which I'm kind of surprised because it didn't really feel that powerful every time I used it. But, you know, I mean, so be it. Spirit Burn got a small adjustment. Ability range got nerfed, but, and the proc damage, sorry, it's overall nerf. The proc damage got reduced as well, so just a nerf. I misread the last line. But yeah, overall, tons of different changes. Most of these changes look good to me. I don't really have anything that I have a problem with, per se. Maybe some small little things, as I said, here and there. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this update, if there's anything that you didn't like or anything that you loved. And yeah, this is a bit less edited video, but thank you guys for your support, and thank you for watching.